the greatest rivals that the All Blacks have ever had. So 5 of the greatest rivals, but we'll see what the boys say.
South Africa.
Without question, it has to be South Africa.
I'm going to go different and probably say England.
Well, I reckon our greatest rival would be England.
I'd say our greatest rival will be France, seeing as though they're the team that have beaten us the most at World Cup games.
The stats don't show it, but one of the All Blacks' first major rivals were Wales. It was the Welsh that inflicted the All Blacks with their first ever Test loss. A controversial 3-0 loss, also the only loss of the famous Originals team that toured the UK in 1905-06. The legendary Invincible All Blacks team of 1924-25 managed to avenge that loss with a 19-point victory that included one of our greatest ever players, George Napier. But the Welsh were able to gain back-to-back victories in 1935 and 53 respectively, with scorelines of 13-12 and 13-8. So after the first half of the century, Wales were the only one of 2 sides that held a winning record against the All Blacks. Unfortunately for Wales, they have never beaten the All Blacks since. Even the amazing Welsh side of the 1970s could not gain that elusive win. It is unfortunate that the rivalry has not been as strong since the 1970s, as the All Blacks have run riot against the men from the valleys. This stare down in 2008 showed possibly some fight from the Red Dragons. However, you do not hope it takes the Welsh another 70 years to gain a famous victory. England has always seen New Zealand as a smaller brother, and to comfortably lose their first test in 1905 to little brother would have been embarrassing. The English had to wait till 1924 for revenge, but there was nothing much to smile about after that encounter as well, as they took on a mighty invincible All Black side, especially famous All Black Cyril Brownlee, who was the first player to be sent off in test matches. That didn't stop the All Blacks though, winning that test match 17-11. However, England finally tasted success in 1936 in the famous Prince Obolensky test, which England won 13-0. The All Blacks would win the next 6 test matches before losing a rare home test at Eden Park in 1973. England was starting to win tests, albeit decades apart, including this 1983 test which they won 15-9 at Twickenham. And then 10 years later they did the same thing at the same ground with the same scoreline. But this rivalry was about to take a wicked twist in the mid-90s as a certain player called Jonah Lomu burst onto the scene. Scoring amazing tries like this at the 95 and 99 World Cup, England could not bear the sight of Jonah Lomu. But Sir Clive Woodward took English rugby to new heights in the professional era, including back-to-back wins at home in 2002 and a rare win here in Wellington in 2003, which gave Martin Johnson's side the perfect ammunition for a World Cup win in 2003. Despite All Blacks' dominance in this rivalry, the odd loss, including this one here in 2019, always seems to sting, and one that an All Blacks player will never forget. Many rugby fans believe France are the All Blacks' greatest rugby rivals. Now, when it specifically comes to Rugby World Cups, I 100% agree. The 2 sides contested the first Rugby World Cup final in 1987, with the All Blacks comfortably winning in front of a delirious home crowd 29-9. Fast forward 24 years and the 2 sides again contest rugby's biggest crown at the same ground in a more tense, physical and contested final 8-7. History will suggest that France has also had their fair share of wins, albeit great upsets, including the famous 99 World Cup semi-final at Twickenham. The French played the greatest 20 minutes of rugby as they won 43-31 against their much-fancied opponents. The World Cup quarter-final of 2007 also created another famous French win, showing that 99 was no fluke. But it definitely enhanced France's reputation as a side that can beat any on its day, even themselves. The French have also shown time and time again that they play rugby with this amazing flair and unique confidence. Like this breathtaking try from the end of the world in 1994, once again at Eden Park. This team would be the last to win a series in New Zealand before the Irish side recently did it in 2022. But French flair has always been around, including this amazing Bastille Day try that helped France record their first win on New Zealand soil, once again at Eden Park in 1979. But one thing is for sure is that us New Zealand fans will never, ever, ever count France out. In my opinion, the rivalry between Australia and New Zealand started here at the SCG on this fine day in 1979. The Aussies won a Dower Test 12-6. The problem was, the All Blacks did not know what all the fuss was about with this big trophy. Unbeknownst to them, it was a trophy competed for since the 1930s, and the All Blacks had it for 40 years. It is fair to say, but Australia were not good at rugby, and not good at it for a long time. The odd test and even rarer test series were won, but the never-ending competition with other sports like AFL and Rugby League meant rugby union was underdeveloped in most of Australia. So Australia had to change its philosophy, and it did. And changes were seen in the late 1970s into the 80s. And with superstars like Nick Farr-Jones, Michael Liner and the great David Campese, the Aussies had finally created a lethal combination. A combination which won a test series for the first time in New Zealand since 1949, with this series winning test at Eden Park. The 1990s and 2000s were a golden era in Australian rugby, which created many famous moments and wins against the All Blacks, including famous tackles, penalties, tries that added to what had become an amazing rivalry. The great John Eales and George Gregan became household names even through New Zealand eyes, as they would be a part of the great Aussie side that whitewashed the All Blacks 3-0 in 1998. The Aussies, though, have not won the Bledisloe Cup since 2003, as the All Blacks had again reigned supreme with the sad reality of yesteryear. We hope for our dear Aussie cousins that, in the famous words of our friend George, it is not 4 more years for the Wallabies. Without a doubt, the All Blacks and Springboks have the greatest rivalry in all of rugby. From the outset, this rivalry was destined for greatness, as both sides drew their first Test series in 1921, including playing to a 0-0 draw in atrocious conditions in the third Test in Wellington. The teams also shared an ultra-competitive series in the Republic 7 years later, as South Africa's harsh apartheid system was integrated into their society, meaning Māori All Blacks like the legendary George Napier and Jimmy Milne were declared ineligible. The Springboks, led by legendary halfback and eventual administrator Dani Craven, successfully toured in 1937, winning a decisive third Test at Eden Park by a comfortable 17-5 margin, thus becoming the first side to win a Test series in New Zealand. More pain was inflicted on the All Blacks in 1949 as they were swept 4-0, large in part to a great goal-kicking prop, Ockie Giffen. 1956 was probably the series that defies this amazing rivalry. The Springboks were hugely popular tourists with the New Zealand public. That exact same public, however, wanted nothing more than an All Blacks victory. The first Test was exactly that. The Springboks showed its forward dominance to win one of the most tenacious tests of all time to tie the series. Then the All Blacks recalled some reinforcements and it helped them win a decisive third Test. This famous try by the great Peter Jones helped the All Blacks inflict the first ever series loss on the Springboks. Another famous Springbok tour, the Tour of 1981, was a battle both on and off the field. Traditionally a rugby-mad country that respected its South African rivals, it fell into heated division about its confronting laws on racial separatism. The rugby, while amazing and highly competitive, in which the All Blacks sealed the series with a crucial and controversial penalty by Alan Hewson, was second to New Zealand's violent protests to end the apartheid movement once and for all. It had definitely hit home to the Springboks camp that saw firsthand what the tour represented to a country thousands of miles away from their own, and being such invested in human rights, it had an immediate positive impact on both countries. After South Africa's return to the international rugby scene in 1992, in which the Springboks still held a winning record against their ultimate foes, they hosted the first Rugby World Cup in 1995 and won it in a tense 15-12 final against the All Blacks. A year later, the All Blacks toured South Africa and finally pulled off the last accomplishment, which was to win a Test series in the Republic. And after the All Blacks had dominated a majority of the rivalry in the 2000s and 2010s, the Boks have brought parity back to this amazing rivalry, and where the respect between these two amazing countries is eternal and genuine, and has literally had everything. close, hard-fought, uncompromising competition on the field to friendly banter and mutual respect off it. It is in the Springbok and All Blacks DNA to win, but also show those values that make this rivalry unrivaled.
Our greatest rivals, without a shadow of a doubt, is the Springboks. Anytime the All Blacks play South Africa, it is all war. So for me, our greatest rivals are the Springboks.